Yeah, am I doing good?
I like this interview so far.
We haven't even started, yeah.
Yeah.
I should push this back a little bit, maybe. All right.
Okay, so
Still hear me okay?
the recording.
Oh, shit.
Usually do 3 claps to sync the audio. And let's see. Ready to go?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so welcome to the 3rd episode of the Dev Bootcast. We're in our 4th week here at DBC Chicago, and again, we're joined by Tony Ta, all the way to the left there.
That's me.
And today we're lucky enough to have one of our instructors, Matt Baker, here.
Hey, good to be here.
So you actually arrived around the same time we did, just at the beginning of February, I believe,
Yeah.
right?
I started with you guys, that Monday.
It seems like you haven't had time to do much of anything, I would think, outside of DBC.
Nope.
Haven't left his mark yet.
Yeah, I've been pretty busy. But getting enough R&R to stay alive and afloat.
That's cool. So actually, I guess we know a few things about you. I think you said you majored in CS, journalism minor.
Yeah. Wow. Just taking notes or something?
Yeah, be careful what you say around me.
Okay.
He was. I
it'll
totally
be
forgot
written
about
down.
all of this.
So after that, you did some programming, ended up at a startup where you actually had a hand in hiring.
Yeah, it was part of the interview process. Yeah.
Okay. And somehow ended up at Dev Bootcamp.
Somehow.
So care to describe your journey to us?
Yeah, where do you want me to start?
Wherever you like.
Cool.
Or Tony, have any input?
Yeah. I'm like, yeah. Why'd you get out of, like, I don't know. I want to call it the private sector, but it's all the private sector. Why'd you get out? What prompted you to get into teaching?
Yeah. So I had a fantastic job with a fantastic company. It was Wealthfront in Palo Alto, California. I was there for 3.5 years and really put everything I had into it, and I loved it there. But I just really felt like it was time for a change. I was ready to leave Silicon Valley and be somewhere else. I worked with really great people there, and there was a part of me that was afraid that if I joined another team, I'd just be disappointed. So there was that half of it, and then I've always wanted to teach. It's something I really enjoyed doing, the TA thing in college, and I like the idea of giving back. I've been really blessed, and I got into programming through a series of lucky strokes, and I feel like it's just appropriate for me to do what I can to help other people get into it and help sort of widen the gate into this field. I think it's kind of there's some obstacles to surmount, especially for minorities and women, and so if I can have a hand in helping get more people into this field with a greater range of backgrounds, then I will be a happier person.
So how'd you end up at Dev Bootcamp then? Or were you looking for jobs where you could teach, or?
It's a funny story. I heard about Dev Bootcamp when they first started, and I thought that was a super cool idea. I didn't give any thought to teaching there. And then we hired a couple Dev Bootcamp grads at Wealthfront, actually, Justin Silverman and Clint Mallins, and it was great. They were awesome. They did awesome work, and I was super impressed. And they talked a lot about the program, and I was incredibly impressed with what I heard.
Were these recent grads, like just right out of
Yeah,
DBC?
yeah. I think they both graduated from the program in 2012. I know Justin had done some TAing afterwards. He did phase 4 when DBC was still doing a phase 4. So he sort of invested more time into his learning before he even applied. And I think, So so they just had a lot to say, and I really wanted to hear about their experiences. So what I walked away with was an understanding that, like, A, this was a really incredible organization. B, they put a huge emphasis on emotional intelligence. The fact that they had these engineering empathy sessions where we really talk about what it means to be, better people and more effective humans in our relationships with greater, empathy and
Mhm.
compassion in addition to the tech was wild to me. I had actually at one point considered leaving CS and trying to get a degree in therapy and actually go into that field. So I was looking to make the switch that Dave Hoover made in reverse.
Yeah.
The director here, he was a therapist and then later became a programmer. So the idea that I could go somewhere where I could be a part of an organization that puts a lot of value in empathy and emotional intelligence and technical acumen was incredible. So it was just too good to be true. I honestly had no choice but to apply here. I didn't really see how else I could do it.
Cool.
Yeah.
And were you looking for something specifically in Chicago?
Yeah. So I went to school in Illinois, a little school called Knox College, 3 hours southwest of here in the middle of a cornfield. So I had a lot of friends here, spent a good amount of time here over the last few years. And so I just always kind of wanted to live here for a while. Found out DBC had a location here, came out and visited, and it was like so clearly the place that I needed to be. So that's how I ended up in Chicago specifically instead of SF. Yeah.
So I think the engineering empathy and that type of stuff was something we were kind of unsure of before actually coming to Dev Bootcamp, and we
absolutely
ended up really liking it. I think getting a lot out of it.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely something that, our first priority, I think I can speak for most people, if not everyone, coming in here, is to learn how to program. And get a job from it, and that's pretty much it. But one thing that was really surprising and actually ends up being like a huge benefit, or so we hear from like recent grads, is the engineering empathy thing. Is I guess what they call it, the soft skills.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So. Oh.
Yeah. I remember talking to Justin and Client both, and both of them had mentioned that like those EE sessions were really important, and I actually talked to Justin quite a bit at Wealthfront about it, and more than once he said that like the EE sessions and what he learned there absolutely made him a more effective team member, which is cool. And
did you actually see that result? Did you see? I mean,
they were both incredible to work with.
Yeah.
And
awesome.
I put a lot of value in that in my coworkers. I think Wealthfront did too, and we really thought a lot about culture fit. And the most successful people I have met have been people who are capable of empathizing, capable of compassion, and work hard to be good at their relationships with other people.
Yeah.
So to me, it's there's the higher level goal of like let's all be incredible human beings, and that's wonderful, but it is a logical piece of a curriculum for people that want to go into tech and be effective members of their teams. Like there's a tactical angle to this as much as it feels like a touchy-feely thing, which it is, and it's cool that we can do that. But
it's definitely something that from just learning the program by yourself, you don't really get that experience to work with other people.
Yeah.
And DBC they really emphasize pair programming, which is prevalent out in the industry. Is it?
I think it depends.
Yeah.
There are definitely places that are pretty hard, like take a hard line and do it all the time.
But in any case, you're working with a team and getting people used to that and making getting them to a point where they actually excel at that. That's a really awesome skill.
Yeah, and it's not a skill you necessarily have coming out of some traditional education.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of CS programs and have group projects, but the fact that we are really focused on getting you guys to learn how to jive and work together, I think is actually a huge benefit of DVC, specifically because like that's a huge challenge. like it's not just learning how to write effective code, like learning how to work with people.
I feel like that could be the hardest part.
It's a huge challenge. So I'm glad we do that.
Yeah, I think talking to people that attended DBC before coming here, a lot of them said that learning to work with people was actually the harder part of getting through it. So I was wondering, amongst the teachers, I really appreciate that you seem to try new things. There was one particularly awesome thing that Matt did. He built a sample app to show us how SQL worked and walked us through basically how someone might try to hack it. And that's pretty great. And I also see that during lectures you specifically gate it towards not advancing until people are on the same page. So I was wondering, is there anything in particular that drew you to Dev Bootcamp in terms of their teaching philosophy or things you're looking to do?
That's a good question. I definitely respect the freedom they afford teachers to experiment. And that's a hard thing to do when you have more than one location. Like, maintaining freedom and also consistency is tough, but I've been really happy with what I've seen, the company pushing forward to sort of strike the right compromise there. So having the freedom is amazing. Nobody's telling me to lecture a certain way, which is why I can do things like, make the silly SQL injection app, right? It wasn't silly when you guys hacked it. That was brutal for my ego, but
So how'd you come up with that idea?
I don't know.
Well, why don't you tell people about what it was?
Sure. Yeah. So the the app was I won't call it a Twitter clone because that implies that it actually was more than just a few lines of code. But I knew I had to teach SQL injection. I knew that at its core, SQL injection's just sort of learning about malicious string interpolation, which is pretty dry. And it doesn't even get at the exciting part, which is actually forming an attack. So I've done some they call it capture the flag challenges. Some companies will basically put up things that you're supposed to hack, and so the farther you get, the more interested they are in you as a candidate. So it's sort of a recruiting thing. Yeah. So I know Stripe's done a few, and I think 1 or 2 years ago I did Stripes, and part of it was forming SQL injections, much like we did. So I guess that's what sort of gave me the original idea. Now that I think about it, and then I sat down and banged out some vulnerable code, and then the other half of it.
So it wasn't your best work.
Yeah, well, security. It was. I talked to some of the teachers about this. It was fascinating to purposely try to create something terrible. It's I remember. I don't know if you guys ever seen the movie Giant Shark vs. Mega Octopus. The acting is so bad that it's impossibly bad. I actually think all those actors might be brilliant because it's the kind of performance that Brad Pitt being told to be a bad actor would give. That's how bad it is. So I felt I've been programming for a while and I was asking myself to do as terrible a job as possible. So it was kind of fascinating. But anyway, that's
yeah. What did the other teachers think about that when you talked to them about it?
They thought it sounded promising. Yeah. We haven't talked about it too much. I sent the link out and I think I sort of reported how things went, and we were all really happy with that. So I was surprised at how smoothly it went. We looked at the application and I asked all of you to infer the table structure. So let's look at this now. Tell me, what kind of queries might I be writing, et cetera. And if you actually go look at the repo on GitHub, you'll see that I think what we sketched out was precisely what was going on in there. So basically everybody was pumped to hear that it seemed to work so well. And then it was great when I got feedback from you guys that you really enjoyed it.
Yeah, so, we definitely enjoyed it.
So it was cool. Yeah, just please don't hack anybody now.
It seems like you really emphasize I guess skills and techniques that are important in the real world. So preventing SQL injections. You also emphasize not storing passwords as plain text.
Yeah.
And all these things. Is there anything from your past experience that kind of prompted you to do that? Or
storing in plain text?
Or anything, yeah.
Well, I feel like if you just watch the headlines, you see some really embarrassing things have happened over the last several years, And a lot of times you'll see a big hack take place, and it'll be a big company or an established organization, and then you find out that they weren't encrypting the passwords in their database. And it's just like, you know, we have this idea that these big organizations are employing programmers who know what they're doing, and sometimes they don't. And so if we're going to put you out in the world, like, I don't have control over those people, but I do have a degree of control over what you guys learn. So I feel like the least I can do is tell you to salt your hashes and not store plain text and things like that. So it's definitely a motivation. You know, you can go help other companies not create crappy code after this, which is cool.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons we particularly wanted to talk to you is that we think you'd be really suited towards commenting on the prospects for Dev Bootcamp grads upon graduating. You've actually hired people, and I think you said that prompted you to look more into Dev Bootcamp.
Oh, it was definitely interesting. Yeah. So at Wealthfront, we interviewed a lot of people last year. I interviewed a lot of people, and so I got to talk to a lot of junior engineers, a lot of senior engineers, and it was a really interesting experience just to sort of see what they were looking for, and, you know, ways they were strong and ways they weren't. One of the advantages I felt to Dev Bootcamp grads was that it was sort of twofold. One, you don't get a formal education in web stack development in college. You might take a databases class, but like nobody's, I mean, there are exceptions, of course, but like in general, I don't think you're going to find CSS, JavaScript, Ruby, Rails, Postgres 101. Like, I don't think you're going to get that. And so there was actually a lot of merit in working with people who sort of had a somewhat formal education in these things. There are plenty of programmers who pick it up over time. But one of the things I liked about the people I worked with at Wealthfront, especially on the web stack, or on both sides, but particularly working on the web stack, was that they had a more formal knowledge of what was going on. Like, they actually read some CSS specs and some JavaScript specs. They had worked hard to formalize their knowledge of these things that, most of the time we learn intuitively. Like, oh, I know I need to float this box over here because it does this and that. But like, I want to know how that affects the normal flow and the formatting.
And the other elements on the DOM.
Yeah. So I like to dig into the spec and stuff. So I found that to be really useful as somebody who, was part of a team and helping to interview these people and thinking about the ways we would grow. And the other thing was that they were moldable. We had some strong people, and in some ways we felt like here were people who had just gone through this 9-week program. They're insanely motivated. They knew how to learn. They'd been taught how to learn. They were used to pushing themselves really hard to expand themselves. They knew what it was like to drink out of the fire hose, to be overwhelmed. And so in some ways I felt like with proper mentorship, bringing on a DBC grad into a team was really like almost just an extension of the experience that they had here. And like, it was no surprise that the two people we hired just proceeded to like, take to this like it was like wildfire, and like learn so much and advance so quickly, much the way I've seen you guys do that here. So.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah. Don't get cocky, Tony.
So you mentioned learning how to learn.
Yeah.
And we hear that a lot, that's a really important skill to have in the workplace. So can you give us a little bit of information what that's like on the other side? Yeah,
totally. I mean, so you go into your first code base and get your first tech job, and there's no documentation, right? If you're at a good company, there's tests, but there might not be. And so you just kind of have to fall into this mess of chaos and orient yourself somehow. And so knowing strategies that you can use to like parse what's going on and orient yourself and start to learn is important. Nobody's going to tell you how to use a library or how to find the right technology for a certain task if you're on the job. So that's something you need to know. because you don't, you want to learn from your coworkers and expand yourself, but you don't want to be an unnecessary burden. And then, it's interesting to meet people who, I started out self-taught and then did CS, but I've definitely met individuals who started out with CS. Their first exposure was CS 101 in college, and they went all the way through. And there's plenty of incredible engineers that come out that way, but I've definitely met some who don't know how to code. It's odd, but they have a hard time finding their own answers because there isn't a textbook or a teacher to tell them. And that's highly variable on the program and the individual, of course, but you certainly can't leave. Nobody could graduate Dev Bootcamp in that state. Like, that couldn't happen because you wouldn't make it through the program. So there's a degree of a guarantee there that I think is really valuable. Yeah.
Cool.
So would you be able to comment on so when I was researching how people viewed Dev Bootcamp grads, was pretty split. Some people felt like you could never learn enough in 9 weeks to be able to do something, and then other people were like, oh, it's awesome. Would you be able to comment as far as what the split would be like in general tech sector?
I don't know. I'm not gonna make stuff up. I don't know. All my experience with Dev Bootcamp was at Wealthfront and centered around that team. I know the Eng team there definitely has seen the light. We turned down some grads too. They very much are looking for like the absolute strongest of the strongest that they can pull. But so I don't know what the split's like out there. I know I've definitely met people who've sort of seen the light and other people who don't buy it, and that's okay. If you really don't think you can learn web, like full stack development and how to become a competent junior engineer that's ready to sort of apprentice in 9 weeks, then I would take a serious look at your ego. We're all learning, and if you really think that's true, then I think that you probably need to let some hot air out. So that's just my opinion, and a particularly inflammatory one at that.
Yeah. But still very muted.
Yeah, well, this is being recorded.
Yeah.
I don't want to get fired. So.
Sure.
So this is something I've been meaning to include. Basically, I saw some actual stats regarding grads. So this is from an article in Built in Chicago in September, and across their first 5 cohorts in DBC Chicago. At this time, only the first cohort crossed the 3-month mark, which they used to measure employment.
Right.
And they were at about 90% and an average of 70K.
Mm-hmm.
And our own internal person that helps place us, introduce us to companies here, she ballparked it at about the same place, 65, high 70s in SF. So just for anyone else that's considering Dev Bootcamp.
Yeah, it's good info.
So I think we kind of touched on this a little bit as far as advice for people trying to break into programming, but I was wondering if you had anything else.
Sure.
Well, maybe we could start on how you got into it, because I think you mentioned that I think it was a conversation about age, and you mentioned something like, but I've been programming since I was 18. Something like that.
Yeah,
but,
younger, actually.
Younger? Yeah. So it sounds like you got into it like when you were, in high school?
So I took my first programming class when I was 9.
Wow.
Yeah, so there was like a Saturday, they called it Saturday Academy in Portland, where I grew up, and my mom petitioned the school for some funds to send me there, and so I was fortunate to have really involved parents who cared very much. And I learned BASIC. It didn't destroy my mind, as some people think it can. But and it didn't stick. I created some silly programs, and then I gave up. I took another class in middle school. It was Java. Didn't really stick, and I gave up. And I took another one towards the end of middle school, and it was C. And I guess I just, looking back on it, I just had a really good teacher.
Yeah.
And that changed everything. A lot of syntax out there is based on C, not everything, but a lot of it is. So that kind of helped. I started to pick up PHP in high school. So I was exposed to programming. I don't feel comfortable saying I actually started programming probably until I was 14 or something. But I just found PHP tutorials and MySQL. People hate on PHP, and that's fine. Like, they have good reason to. But for a person with very few resources on programming, there are a bunch of tutorials, there are a bunch of forums. People are willing to answer my questions. So I decided to just build a blog. I just picked a project. And that meant I had to learn CSS, and it meant I had to learn how to use a database, and meant I need to learn PHP. And
wait, so you made your own CMS, or?
That's a generous word, man. No, I made a blog. Okay. It wasn't fancy, and I had sort of a silly template engine and stuff.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and it wasn't good code, but I picked a project that forced me to learn a bunch of things, and that meant by the end of it, I knew how to write to a database, but I had no idea how to write out to a file, right? My knowledge was super sparse, but it did get me started, and that's, I didn't even want to do CS actually, interestingly. I thought that was going to take a hobby and turn it into an academic pursuit, and that sounded shitty.
So what got you into that?
The government offered me a lot of money. They were trying to get, quote unquote, lower income kids into the sciences. I wouldn't say I was lower income, but they thought I was. So there was a grant that I could have if I did a science, and then I got blocked out of a bunch of classes, and literally the only one I could take was CS 102. So I went in and I talked to the professor, and I had to convince him to let me skip 101. And I made the enormous mistake of telling him that it was the only class I could take, which is not something a teacher wants to hear.
Yeah.
They want to hear that I'm passionate to take it. So I barely convinced him that I should be in his class. So his name's Don Blahita, and he literally changed my life. He's the best teacher I've ever had. I'm still friends with him. I still see him all the time, once a year. And I think a big part of the reason I'm here is because of him. I mean, it's affected the way I teach, the way I think about teaching, the way I interact with you guys, and what I want to do. So, that was a long-winded answer, but it's important to mention him if we're going to talk about how I got here. Honestly, I feel really fortunate to have been taught by him.
Cool. So, what would you suggest for somebody who's starting out?
Yeah, it's tough.
'Cause I know the resources that were available when you started were pretty sparse.
Back in my day, yeah.
But
in the 2000s. No, it's a good question. Obviously, I think these Dev Bootcamp, kind of programs are incredible, but they're not accessible to everybody. They cost money, and people have jobs and life circumstances. So if you don't have that, pick a project. You can't. It depends on the person, but I don't think you can learn how to program without wanting to build something, because that's what we do. These are tools to build. Mm-hmm. So pick a project. I picked a blog, and I found some tutorials on making a blog with PHP. Don't use PHP. There are resources out there. Pick projects that have a lot of resources. So Ruby and Rails is well documented, and there's a lot of stuff out there. There are a lot of cool languages, but there's so much information out there for beginners. I think it's a good idea to pick something that can provide you a lot of resources. Stack Overflow is pretty cool. It's amazing to be able to ask a question and hopefully get some good answers. Don't be intimidated if people vote you down because you didn't ask it in the right way. You'll learn. And then I think the last one is just have a little bit of a thick skin, because there's shitty people out there. There are nerds who feel like they need to put you down for not knowing things, and if you let that get to you, it's not going to do any good. So fuck the haters and keep programming and find the people who want to help you become better, and ignore the ones who don't.
I like that. Fuck the haters.
It's not a bad thing to live by.
So, Tony, is there anything else you want to discuss before?
No, I think we covered
Cool.
a lot of the bases, yeah. And
so one last thing is we asked a few of our cohort mates to come and ask you if they had any questions. So
Oh boy.
I think they're there.
you guys have any questions?
They're sitting outside. This is cute.
Eavesdropping and brainstorming.
Yeah.
Please go ahead, sir.
Yeah, you guys want to just hop
Can
on?
you introduce yourselves or something? Yeah. Yes. Sit down.
I can try.
Cool.
I don't know if it'll work. I'm Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
What other information do you need of me?
There you are.
I'm Kelsey.
Do you need to know anything else besides our names?
No, I mean, you just introduce yourselves and ask your questions, I guess.
Okay, well, Matt was talking about getting started into programming by choosing a project and then trying to build it.
Mm-hmm.
And you gave the example of a blog specifically.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously there are other options, right? Can you
Yeah.
think of any other, off the top of your head, simple-ish project ideas for a person who wants to just
Yeah.
dive in and build something?
You know, I could, but let me offer a different answer first, and let's see if this helps. And then you can ask me the question again if it doesn't. I think everybody has an idea of what they want to build if they want to program. If you're looking to learn how to program, there must be something about it that like interests you. There's something that you want to do with it. And sometimes what we pick, especially when we don't know a lot, is like really, really, really ambitious. I sort of got lucky and picked something that wasn't that ambitious. And so you might, pick that project, and you might find that your project is to, create a 3D game engine. And that's going to be really hard to do as a new programmer. But I don't like to tell anybody not to try. What I would encourage is don't be scared to reduce the scope. So if you hit the wall and you're like, I can't do this, that's okay. It's not failure. Think about what you can do. And so you might have to slowly ratchet down your hopes and dreams. Maybe you're going to find yourself starting with like putting a green circle up on a canvas in HTML, or using like a simple 2D drawing library and writing some Ruby or Python or Java or C. But I guess the important point is like pick a project you care about, because I can't tell you what to care about, and then reduce the scope, the complexity of it, until it's at something you can bite off, and then try and ratchet it up a little bit piece by piece, because it's okay to have big dreams, but you shouldn't, if you can't accomplish it right away, you shouldn't let it stop you. Yeah. Is that okay?
I think that's a good answer. Yeah.
All right. Okay, cool. Thanks, Sarah. I'm glad.
You also mentioned that you learned a lot of languages before you had one that really stuck. And we're learning Ruby here. Do you think there are any benefits to learning Ruby as a first language over something else? Like
I think
C?
Ruby's a cool language to get started with. Yeah. There are a lot of opinions on where to start, and I respect them all. And I don't know if I can even like pick one. But I do feel confident saying Ruby's a pretty good one to get started with. There's a lot of documentation out there. It feels really natural to work with. And parts of it even read like English, which helps us bridge that gap. I also see a lot of value in learning more than one. It's sort of like being multilingual, right? Like those kids who have the fortune of learning 2 languages before they're 10 or whatever. It's a lot easier for them to pick up a third. And I think that's true. And I like that you guys get exposed to JavaScript as well as Ruby, because the next one you pick up is going to be easier. You learn the things that are sort of abstractly true about all languages, and then you learn which things are just sort of like concrete versions of these abstract concepts. But on the fly, I don't know if I can come up with like an incredibly poetic justification for Ruby, but I think it's a cool language. I've watched people start with it and be very effective in their learning, so that's good enough for me. Yeah.
And what language do you think is like the most fun?
Yeah, okay. So I think functional languages are super cool. Scala is one that I started learning, and I'm really into that. I've played with some other ones like Haskell or Scheme. And so functional languages are kind of different. You guys haven't really worked with any of them here. We've sort of talked about some functional concepts, like passing functions in to other functions in JavaScript. We did some crazy things with that. Yeah, it's just a different way of thinking. It's kind of like, Ruby and JavaScript are like romantic languages. Like one might be English and one might be Spanish or something. But and then I feel like functional languages are like Japanese. Like they're just a completely different concept. So for me, that's really exciting because I learned a lot of languages like Java and JavaScript and C. So for me, it's the ideas are different and the abstractions are different, and I actually I feel at peace when I write functional code. It's very zen for me, and I hope you guys can understand that. Maybe I'll do a lightning talk on functional programming and just try not to make your head spin. We'll see. Challenge accepted.
Okay, and then this is from like the DBC speaker last night, but he was asked about what he thought about the future of Ruby. And he basically said that he thought that it was at its peak. So I wanted to get your opinion.
Sure, yeah. I think all of us love to predict the future, and we love listening to ourselves predict the future. So like, I will happily take your soapbox while simultaneously acknowledging like just how utterly useless this opinion is. People have said Java was like at its peak for years and years. Java's a cool language that has some incredible features. A lot of really great products are built in it. A lot of people know how to use it and use it effectively. But like that supposedly peaked a long time ago. You could say the same about Ruby. You could say Node, JavaScript, mostly by way of Node, is like the new hotness. Every tool has its advantages and its disadvantages. Every tool is good at some things and not good at others. And I hope that as a field, we focus more on picking the right tool for the job, and less on sort of what's hip. Not to say that the speaker last night wasn't saying that. I in terms of popularity, like, yes, I'm sure something will sort of eclipse Ruby, which has been a really hot language. And I don't think he's totally off base. I just don't think it changes what you should learn or what you'll be working with, if that makes sense. Yeah.
You have a question, John?
Yeah.
Get closer.
Should I step up to the mic?
Check out this goblet, internet.
All right.
I'm drinking water. This is ridiculous. This weighs like 12 pounds. Oh.
Yeah, no, and Kenny said you guys were in here doing the podcast, so I thought I'd stop by and
What's up, man?
Asking you questions about different things.
How's it going?
It's going good. Probably, probably questions we haven't asked you before already. Let's see. I guess coming from sort of the Bay Area and in a job where you've hired,
Interviewed.
Yeah. Well, at least interviewed junior developers.
Yeah.
How did like the people here who are the boots at Dev Bootcamp kind of strike you in comparison to the people that you've interviewed like out there? Is it like a completely different type of person, or is it, comparable or better or worse, or, what are your thoughts?
That's loaded.
Yeah.
Try and.
Well, and what is good to you about, the people that you would see here, I guess, then versus, what you've interviewed before?
So you're talking about like the difference between DVC grads and people from different backgrounds?
Computer science grads from Stanford, but I know how you feel about them. So. No, sorry.
I have no opinion on graduates of any program from ever. These are not any opinions I did have. If I had them, were not the views of my employer. They should not be interpreted as such. Thank you. I need a lawyer. Differences, I don't know. There's just a huge variation. There's of like talent and skill set, and there's no way to know. I've met people from good schools that are really good. I've met people from good schools that are really not good, and it just really depends. I don't know if I can tell you. It's kind of like saying, I don't know, like all the Dev Bootcamp grads are like blue marbles, and then out there is a sea of different colored marbles, and how do you compare? Well, like, okay, you guys are all blue, I'll give you that. But like, it would be hard to draw an average. I mean, maybe the answer is that the the variation is massive across you know my own experience. There's massive variation across even people with like more experience. They don't necessarily converge on some like ideal senior engineer. Just to clarify, I don't think I am an ideal senior engineer either. There are places I'd like to grow and be more effective too. So, and I think we all have that. So that's like a complete non-answer to your question.
Right. Well, so I guess dropping the comparison to other types.
Okay. Sure.
How do you like the people who are here as
cool.
future developers?
I mean, what is we talked about a little bit already, but it'll be good to summarize. So I like the emotional intelligence that people from this program often have. They chose to be here. They chose to engage in these engineering empathy sessions where we hit some pretty heavy stuff. That alone shows a degree of intelligence emotionally. And then we all work hard in those sessions to learn how to be more compassionate, more empathetic, which makes you a better teammate. So I really respect that. And another thing I mentioned earlier was I actually like sort of the, in a sense, formal education on web concepts that Dev Bootcamp produces, because I think most of these engineers out there, like myself, we just sort of kind of picked it up as we went. And it was only through a great effort that I start to formalize my knowledge of these things that I sort of just intuitively had to learn. I like that you guys get some explicit information and we talk about, things like the box model, right? And you understand that as opposed to intuitively knowing like, well, if I have some content in here and some padding and margin, it's all going to be additive. Like we actually talked about, why that is and where it's specified. So those are two things I like. And then they've always just been really nice people. So that's cool.
Is the empathy part in your experience, is that more important than the coding skill?
I would say empathy, their drive to learn and their ability to learn are huge. And this is very much a subjective opinion. Mm-hmm. But like, if you're a nice person who knows how to work with other people and wants to be good at that, you also are really hungry to learn, and you have some skills under your belt knowing how to learn. If you can do those things, then you can do anything, right? Like, that's not just true of DBC grads. I think that's true of like every programmer, and especially good ones, like who grow. And like certainly the mentors I've had have been that way, and I've been really fortunate. So those are the important things, and I think DBC happens to put an emphasis on that in addition to the technical learning we do here. So that's cool. That's a good leading indicator.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Cool.
Thanks, guys.
Let you in.
Thanks, man.
Man, you could really talk, huh?
I'm super long-winded. Yeah, you guys had no idea what you were getting in
keep
for.
Keep going.
Yeah, sorry. Well, you can edit this afterwards. Just cut me out or bleep me out. Just be like, oh, you just kept cussing.
But yeah, thanks for joining us on this podcast.
This is so heavy.
It's Matt Baker, at Matt Baker on Twitter. I believe you do some writing. I don't know if you want to share about that or projects.
I want to do more, but I don't. No, just follow me on Twitter. There's a link to my Medium account, which has a single article on it. Otherwise, you should read the Wealthfront Engineering blog because it's sweet. I used to write articles there, but all the content's really awesome.
Okay.
So, sorry, I had to plug them once. 1 through 10. Cool.
And as usual, you can reach us at Dev Bootcast. Send us questions, any suggestions for guests, topics, hosts. And I believe that's it for tonight.
Yeah, so I guess I'm Tony. Thank you very much, Matt, for being here.
Thanks. This was awesome. I really appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Wait, we're just going to do a soft out like that?
Guys, you have really nice microphones.
All right.
Bye.
Cool.